Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for coming along. My name's Andrew Kinnell. I'm an organiser for the SSP in West Fife. And unfortunately, Colin Fox couldn't make it along tonight, so I'll be giving the socialist case for independence. Firstly, the main reason I and the SSP support independence for Scotland is because we believe the Scottish working class will be better off. Will be better off both economically and politically. Despite the unionist scaremongering about us being too wee and too poor to manage to go it alone, Scotland is in fact a very wealthy nation. According to the Financial Times, we're one of the richest nations in the world, richer than the rest of the UK as per head of the population. We have a diverse economy, including the lucrative oil and gas industry worth, they estimate there's at least £1.5 trillion worth of oil left in the North Sea. They also reckon there's some oil on the west coast, which we unfortunately can't get to as of yet because of the Trident missile station there. We also have a world-class financial services industry, a whisky industry which is growing all the time, a manufacturing industry which obviously has taken a little hit over the last 30 years but is still pretty strong. And of course, as Louise mentioned, we've got great potential to develop a really strong renewable sector. And we've actually got 25% of Europe's wind energy potential, which could be massive for Scotland and creating tons of jobs. But it's also getting wasted at the moment. Anyway, Scotland over the last 30 years, as Louise has mentioned, has paid more revenues into the Treasury's coffers than we have received back in spending. In 2013, for example, as already mentioned, we paid 9.9% of the overall taxation into the Treasury and received just 9.3% in spending. And this has been a sort of generalisation of what's happened in the last 30 years, and in fact, the surplus we've given in taxes is £30 billion, so that's £30 billion over the last 30 years, which could have been put to use helping Scottish people as opposed to just propping up a warmongering neoliberal government in Westminster. Anyway, it therefore stands to reason that if Scotland keeps all the taxation and revenues raised in Scotland, that we would be better off as a country. And while Scotland is a wealthy country, it could be much wealthier if we can shake off the chains of Westminster's regressive neoliberal rule, which has privatised and decimated working class industries all over the country, not just Scotland, but all of our working class places all over the country, North End and elsewhere. So despite Scotland being a wealthy nation, we're held back by being part of Britain. Successive Westminster governments have pursued policies suited to the interests of corporate elites, big business and bankers, while the majority of Brits and Scots have suffered. We're told by the unionists that the UK is okay. You might see the car stickers with that one there, but you've got the question, who is the UK okay for? Britain is the fourth most unequal country in the so-called developed world, where the richest 5 families have more wealth combined than the poorest 12 million people. Absolutely disgusting. We have 20% of kids growing up in poverty. We've seen in-work poverty increase to a shocking 6.7 million people. That means people are going to work and they're still barely making enough to get by. Like, it's absolutely disgusting. 0 hours contracts have become a sort of norm, widely accepted. You should be grateful if you get a 0 hours contract. It's absolutely ridiculous. We've got the second worst rate of social mobility in the developed world. America is only the worst. So that's essentially meaning that all the top jobs are reserved for posh boys, Etonians like David Cameron. Like, look at the cabinet, it's got 23 millionaires. In the cabinet, there's more millionaires than women in the cabinet. It's absolutely disgusting. And perhaps the most shameful thing about modern Britain is the fact that people are having to turn to food banks. In the 21st century, it's absolutely disgusting. It's actually going up by 1,000% since the Conservative, Liberal, Democrat government came to power. Even before it was still a problem. But you might ask quite rightly, do working class people in Liverpool or Manchester or Newcastle not suffer just as much as Scots do at the hands of Westminster's regressive and unfair rule? And my answer would be, of course they do. However, unlike Manchester or Liverpool or Newcastle or elsewhere, Scotland is a nation, and as a nation, we have the right to self-determination, just as other nations of the world enjoy. It's important to recognise, as great socialists such as James Connolly, the great Scottish socialist John Maclean, and indeed Vladimir Lenin, that the working class is not a monolithic bloc, and in different nations the challenges and choices facing working people are different. This doesn't mean that we're all going to turn our backs on the problems facing the English working class if we vote yes. Far from it. I think the solidarity will always be there, just as it is with Palestine at the moment. I think it's brilliant. We're seeing thousands of folk turn out and supporting the Palestinians as they're getting bombed from the sea by the Israelis. The SSP believes Scotland, free from Westminster rule, can challenge neoliberalism. We can challenge a system which creates these huge inequalities, and we can set an example to the rest of the UK and elsewhere by doing so. As well as being economically better off with independence, it will also benefit the Scottish working class politically. To borrow a phrase from a good friend Colin, who's unfortunately not here tonight, he says, voting yes doesn't make you a nationalist, it makes you a Democrat. If Scotland votes yes to independence, we'll never again have a government we didn't vote for. So no more Tory governments for the foreseeable future anyway. Scotland's centre-left, such as social democratic values, can be achieved only by a yes vote. All Westminster parties, including the so-called Labour Party, back ideologically driven neoliberal austerity measures, which the Scottish electorate has overwhelmingly rejected. When Ed Miliband comes up to Scotland, he talks of socialism and social justice. But then when he returns to Middle England, within the same week, he's talking about the end of tax and spend culture. Do not kid yourself, the British Labour Party do not offer a road to social democratic progressive society. They support Tory cuts. As Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls outlined, if Labour win in 2015, they're pledging to have iron discipline, and that's the words they actually use, the iron discipline on public spending, which means they're going to put through the vast majority of the same Tory cuts that's been happening. It's only going to get worse. And the axe is going to fall on the Scottish Parliament. They reckon about 4 billion is going to be cut off the Scottish Parliament, which is meaning we're all going to be worse off if we vote no. Anyway, it's also worth noting that the Labour Party are committed to the wasting 100 billion on renewing Trident nuclear missiles, which 80% of Scots are in disagreement with. They're committed to backing Israel, despite war crimes committed in recent years and decades. Days and decades and years. And they're also committed to the failing model of neoliberalism and privatisation, deregulation, selling off the NHS. They're no different, they're just Tories who are pretending they're standing up for working people. They don't stand up for working people anymore. Nye Bevan and other great Labour figures from the past would be turning their graves when they hear the NHS, our free education system and other public services, which they helped build, referred to as representing a something for nothing culture, as were described by Joanne Wong. And I want to address another wee myth that's been put forward by Better Together and the Unions campaign. They say that if Scotland votes yes, the rest of Britain will be stuck with eternal Tory governments. Now this is simply not true when you look at the facts. If Scotland votes yes, it basically will have no influence on how the rest of the UK manages. The Scottish vote has only influenced the composition of UK governments for 2 out of the last 67 years. So don't believe them when they say that you're going to be letting down all your neighbours in Liverpool or Manchester or wherever else. It's just nonsense, quite frankly. So in conclusion, I just want to say, I'm in favour of independent socialist Scotland. We disagree with the SNP on some things. We're socialists. We want to see the economy be put in the hands of the working class, in the name of the working class and for the working class. And I think what we mean by working class is the vast majority of people who sell their labour on an hourly basis in order to live. And that's the kind of Scotland I want to see. But independence, regardless if we get a socialist independence straight away, will ensure Scotland never again has to send our young people to die in pointless wars for the interest of the British capitalist class. Never again will we have to put up with sickening policies like the bedroom tax, or before it the poll tax. Never again will we have to endure unelected Tory governments. No longer will we unconditionally support murderous regimes like that of Israel. And we can get rid of the immoral trident nuclear weapons which plague our shores. Independence offers a chance to do things differently, to challenge the status quo and build a better, more just and prosperous country. And to finish with, I'd like to quote a bit of Karl Marx, who says, "Philosophers have long interpreted the world. However, the point is to change it." And what Karl Marx meant by this is, if you really believe in changing something, you have to get out there and actually get active to do it. So if you want to see a yes vote in September, get involved with Yes Cardenden, get involved with the Green Party, get involved with the SNP, get involved with the SFP. And when you wake up on the 19th, or when the results come in the 19th September, sorry, you can be proud that you've done your part to make our country a better place and the world a better place. Thanks so much for listening.